Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be tackling a subject that I think is pretty close to home for, well, everyone, really.
Yeah, pretty universal.
Education.
Hmm.
We've got a whole stack of sources here that look at education from all angles, the power it has, how it's changed over the years, and even some practical tips.
I'm excited to dig in.
Me too. Although I have to
Right now.
admit, one question in particular really got me thinking.
Wow, what's that?
Will traditional education even exist in the future, or is it about to become, well, obsolete? I mean, with all the changes happening, will classrooms as we know them even be around?
Hmm, that's a big question.
It is. And our sources actually jump right into it, exploring how things like technology, societal shifts, and what employers are looking for are all reshaping education.
It's interesting. One of the first things that really jumped out at me from our material was the idea that education is much more than just memorizing facts and figures.
Yeah, definitely. I saw that too. The sources really emphasize critical thinking, curiosity, and even empathy. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Education really shapes how we understand the world around us. It goes way beyond just those facts and figures.
So it's not just what we know, it's how we think.
Exactly. And the source I was looking at actually uses this phrase, sense of responsibility. It argues that education should help us develop that sense of responsibility.
Responsibility. What do you think they mean by that?
Well, I think it's about going beyond just soaking up knowledge and really developing a deeper understanding of how we're all connected.
Hmm.
You know, ourselves, each other, the world around
Well,
us.
it's about connecting the dots, like understanding the implications of what we learn and then using that to, I don't know, make informed decisions,
Mhm.
contribute to something bigger than ourselves.
Precisely. And the source goes on to make a really strong case for how this kind of education is, well, essential for pretty much everything. Personal growth, economic opportunity, even things like social progress and innovation.
So it's not just about individual success, it's about building a better future for everyone.
Right. It benefits us all. But, one thing the sources also point out is that there's a bit of a disconnect between what's traditionally taught in classrooms and the skills people actually need in today's job market.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. I mean, things are changing so fast these days, it's hard to keep up.
Exactly. And that's where the evolution of education comes in. The source I was reading takes us on this fascinating journey through, well, the whole history of education, starting from apprenticeships to the rise of formal schools, and of course now, the huge boom in online learning.
Like Coursera and Khan Academy.
Yeah, all those platforms. It's really amazing to think about how much has changed.
Mind-boggling. Do the sources offer any solutions on how to bridge that gap, between traditional education and the skills that are in demand now?
Well, one source highlights these two approaches. First, there's experiential learning. It's basically learning by doing. And second, there's interdisciplinary studies. It's all about encouraging students to make connections between different subjects.
Interesting. Can you break those down a little more?
Sure. So with experiential learning, it's about moving past just memorizing facts and instead, actually developing those crucial skills, things like critical thinking, problem solving, and being able to work well with others.
So it's about applying what you learn to real-life situations.
Right. And interdisciplinary studies kind of pushes us to break down those traditional walls between academic subjects and, see how everything's connected. Like, how does history influence art? Or how does math play a role in music? Things like that.
It makes a lot of sense in today's world where, things are so interconnected. But I did notice that the sources don't shy away from the challenges facing education.
Yeah, you're right. They paint a pretty stark picture of the issues that are preventing millions of people around the world from getting a good education. Things like inequality, the digital divide, even inconsistencies in teaching standards.
You mentioned the digital divide. It seems like the sources have a bit of a complicated view of technology, right? It's this powerful tool, but it can also make existing inequalities worse.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. The source I was looking at highlights how unequal access to technology puts students from disadvantaged backgrounds at a huge disadvantage.
It's kind of like trying to run a race where some people have a head start and others are, I don't know, running barefoot.
Exactly. It's a powerful analogy.
Hmm.
And with AI becoming more prominent in education, there's a real concern that this gap could widen even further.
Definitely. It's something to keep a close eye on. But in the midst of all these challenges, something else the sources talk about is mental health.
Yes. They actually argue that we need to create learning environments that support the whole student, not
Yeah.
just, their academic performance. They talk about the pressures students face and how important it is to address issues like stress and burnout.
I think a lot of people can relate to that, probably everyone listening. The pressure to succeed can be really overwhelming sometimes.
Absolutely. We really need to shift the focus from just chasing grades to nurturing a genuine love of learning.
So we've talked about the power of education, how it's evolved, and the challenges it faces. It feels like we're at this crossroads. We need to rethink how we approach education in a world that's changing so rapidly.
Yeah, there are a lot of big questions to grapple with.
For sure. And luckily our sources offer some potential answers, but we'll dive into those in the next part of our deep dive.
Can't wait. And that actually leads perfectly into what I think is the most exciting part, the future of learning. Our sources don't just focus on the problems. They also look at some really interesting solutions and trends that could completely transform education as we know it.
Okay, you've got to give me some hints. What are we talking about here? Flying robot teachers. Virtual reality classrooms.
Haha, not quite that futuristic,
Yeah.
although some of the ideas are pretty close. One source talks about these new hybrid learning models, which combine the best of both worlds.
Opinion.
Well, they blend traditional classrooms with, all the flexibility and accessibility of online learning.
So you're saying that instead of being stuck in a physical classroom, you could attend lectures online, work on projects with people from all over the world, and even have like personalized learning paths guided by AI tutors.
Exactly. It's all about creating a more adaptable learning experience.
That does sound pretty amazing, but I can't help but think, wouldn't that risk leaving some students behind? I mean, not everyone has equal access to technology or even learns well in a completely online environment.
That's a really important point, and the source I was reading actually addresses that directly. It acknowledges that there are potential downsides to this approach. The key is to make sure these hybrid models are designed with equity and accessibility at the forefront.
You mean like providing support and resources for students who might need extra help?
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between using technology effectively while still preserving the human connection that's so crucial to learning.
Makes sense. Now, I remember another trend the sources mentioned was this shift towards skills-based learning. Is that connected to the whole disconnect we were talking about earlier, between what's taught in schools and what employers actually need?
Exactly. The source I was looking at argues that, with automation and AI changing the job market so rapidly, there's a growing need to focus on practical skills and hands-on experience.
So are we talking about things like vocational training, apprenticeships, and programs that teach things like coding, data analysis, and even like digital marketing?
Exactly. It's all about making sure students are equipped for the jobs of the future, not just the jobs that exist right now. And it's not just technical skills either.
Oh, right. There are those soft skills everyone's always talking about.
Yeah. Things like communication, problem solving, and critical thinking. These skills are valuable in any field, and they're going to be essential in a world where, things are constantly changing.
It really does sound like education is becoming more, well, customized, tailored to what each individual needs and what the world demands. But what about the bigger picture? I remember the sources mentioning sustainability education too. Why is that becoming so important?
Well, because the challenges facing our planet are more urgent than ever. And honestly, education has a massive role to play in giving future generations the knowledge and skills to tackle these issues head on.
So it's about more than just, learning to recycle or save energy, right? It's about understanding complex issues like climate change, social justice, even the interconnectedness of all living things.
Right. It's a pretty big task for our education systems to take on.
It is. But the sources argue it's absolutely necessary. It's about giving people the power to be responsible global citizens who can make informed decisions and, well, take action to create a more sustainable future. It's amazing how these trends all point to a more holistic, interconnected approach to education. It's not
Yeah.
just about cramming our heads with facts, but about developing the skills, the values, even the mindsets to navigate this crazy, complex world we live in.
Absolutely. And on that note, another thing that really struck me was the emphasis on global connectivity in the sources. As our world becomes more and more interconnected, education needs to keep up. I mean, imagine virtual classrooms where students from different countries can collaborate on projects, share their perspectives, and learn from each other.
That sounds amazing. It's like taking the idea of a classroom and expanding it to the whole world.
Mm.
Although it does make me wonder, is there a chance technology will become too dominant in education? I mean, are we heading towards a future where robots replace teachers altogether?
That's a question a lot of people are asking. And honestly, it's something the source grapples with too. But ultimately, it argues that even though technology will continue to play a bigger and bigger role in education, it's unlikely to completely replace that human element.
So robots won't be replacing teachers anytime soon.
Well, not exactly. The source I was looking at emphasizes that technology should be used to empower teachers to do what they do best. Things like inspiring students, guiding them, and being mentors.
That's a much better way to think about it. Technology as a tool to enhance what teachers do, not replace them entirely. I like that.
Me too. It's reassuring to know that even in a world that's becoming so digital, human connection will still be at the heart of education.
Speaking of lifelong learning, the sources also touch on the fact that learning doesn't stop when we finish school, right?
Definitely not. Education is an ongoing journey. The source I was reading actually highlights the importance of staying curious, having that thirst for knowledge, and, being open to new ideas throughout our lives.
So even if we don't have flying robot teachers or those VR classrooms yet, the future of education still sounds pretty incredible. It's all about adaptability, being creative, and committing to lifelong learning. It's about making sure students are ready for a world that's constantly evolving.
And perhaps most importantly, it's about making sure everyone, regardless of where they come from or what their circumstances are, have the opportunity to benefit from these advancements in education and, reach their full potential.
I'm really starting to see how all of this connects back to that big question we started with, the one about whether traditional education is becoming obsolete.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not so much about classrooms disappearing entirely, but about them evolving to meet the needs of a world that's changing at, well, warp speed. Wow, it feels like we've covered a ton in this deep dive. We started with the history of education, and now we're looking at all these incredible possibilities for the future.
It really highlights just how much education is constantly evolving, doesn't it? It's always adapting to new challenges and finding new opportunities.
Definitely. Something that really stood out to me from the sources was this emphasis on, well, the power of questions. It's not just about finding the right answers. It's about asking the right questions.
I like that. It's about curiosity.
Yeah. And it got me thinking, what are the questions that we should be asking ourselves as learners, as educators, even as a society?
That's a great point. The source I was looking at actually talks about how important it is to develop what they call a questioning mindset if you really want to be a lifelong learner.
Okay.
It's about challenging those assumptions, looking at things from different angles, and always trying to deepen our understanding.
So it's not just about taking in information passively, it's about really engaging with it, questioning it, and making those connections to our own lives and the world around us.
Exactly. It's about being critical thinkers, not just, consumers of information.
Love that.
And the source even gives some practical tips on how to actually develop this questioning mindset.
Oh, like what?
Well, it talks about setting clear goals for what you want to learn, actively looking for diverse perspectives, and engaging in thoughtful discussions with others.
It's about bouncing ideas off each other.
Yeah,
Right. Not being afraid to disagree.
exactly. And the source also emphasizes how important it is to reflect on your own learning process. Ask yourself questions like, what did I learn today? How can I actually use this? What questions do I still have?
And maybe even more importantly, what am I going to learn next?
Right, because being a lifelong learner isn't just about keeping up with the latest trends or getting those new skills for your job. It's about personal growth, being curious, and always wanting to learn more.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into education, I think it's only fitting to leave our listeners with a challenge.
A challenge. I like it.
Embrace the power of questions. Be curious, ask those questions, and never stop exploring the world of learning because it's always evolving.
It really is.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, education isn't just about getting ready for the future. It's about shaping it. It's about empowering people to be informed, engaged, and compassionate citizens who can make a real difference.
That's what makes this topic so fascinating. It's not just about classrooms and textbooks. It's about, well, what it means to be human, to learn, to grow, and to always strive for something better.
Well said. So, to everyone listening, we leave you with this. What questions are you going to ask today? What are you going to learn tomorrow? And how will you use your knowledge and skills to make a positive impact on the world?
And on that note, that's a wrap for this deep dive. We hope you enjoyed exploring the world of education with us.
Keep those minds sharp, those hearts open, and those questions coming.
We'll see you next time. Happy learning, everyone.